Okay, this is a case of,
Repeat the question for the microphone.
okay, so the question was, Washington State has a system that has faced a federal constitutional challenge that also would operate much like Prop 14 would. What is different here from there? And this is a clear case of apples and oranges. Basically here, we're talking about two really bad parts of the law that actually aren't there in the Washington version. That is disenfranchising write-in voters and censoring candidates on the ballot. Those two features are not present up in Washington. We are challenging only those two features. We're not challenging Prop 14 in this lawsuit. It's all about the implementing legislation and the completely foreseeable and bad effects that it would cause to both voters and candidates. And this is something that a state court's going to look at. We've put in both claims under the federal Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. But to make a long answer short, it basically, these are things that are very California specific that a state court is very well equipped to look at.
I want to add to that. Or do you want to add first?
Well, let me.
You go first. You're the expert.
Also, the U.S. Supreme Court did not settle the Washington State case. They only settled one of 4 issues, and they say in footnote 11, we are not discussing 2 other issues. And furthermore, they didn't even settle freedom of association totally. They only said it doesn't violate freedom of association on its face. It may as applied. They sent it back for a trial, which is starting in November this year.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize a point that Richard just made, that the court, basically, the federal court said that on its face, the Washington top 2 system doesn't seem to be unconstitutional, but as it's actually implemented, it might be. And so they had to wait until they actually conducted an election using that system, which they just have, to then evaluate, well, does it violate the federal Constitution based upon how it's being applied?
Yeah, and in this case, on its face, this law is just flat out illegal and unconstitutional, and that's the big difference here.
You mentioned follow the money. It would be interesting to hear if you can recall who were the major funders of Prop 14.
Well, let's see. Some funders were close to the governor.
Yes, the governor's
I
dream
believe
team.
$2 million came from there, roughly.
I don't remember
from
the numbers.
The governor's dream team, at least that much. Who else? There were a number of.
Hewlett-Packard, I think.
Hewlett-Packard may have been. I don't specifically remember. California Chamber of Commerce was very involved in it.
The health industry, the health insurance industry,
Health insurance industry.
they're packed.
Yeah, but one thing to emphasize is that, obviously no one's against political reform. We all agree that the state has problems. The question is, how do you fix it the right way?
Well, along those lines, you had mentioned that there is a right way to do this. I think either of you alluded to something that could have been better or maybe less worse. I'm wondering what would have been suggestions that you would have had other than to just can it.
There's many better solutions, and we can all respond to that. But the simplest thing would have just been to put in a true open primary. These terms have been defined in political science textbooks and Supreme Court decision for a long time. An open primary is one in which the voter walks into the polling place on primary day and is free to choose any party's primary ballot. But each party has its own primary ballot and its own nominees. We can come up with 6 better ideas. I'll stop there and let these guys mention others.
One thing is that a lot of these good ideas are out there, and I'll throw out one in a second, but one thing that I think the state legislature should seriously consider is calling a state constitutional convention. Let's get together some citizens throughout the state to think about this. These are serious issues that need thought. They will not be solved with a simple soundbite or with literally fly-by-the-night legislation. One thing to think about is to have more than multi-member districts. In other words, you elect more than one person for an area. Because, it's true. In some areas, they lean very heavily Democratic. Other areas lean very heavily Republican. And yes, in many cases, it's not competitive there. There are ways to deal with that. Because if you have 2 people elected instead of 1, that, for lack of a better term, keeps the elected officials hungry. They can't take votes for granted. It will make them work harder. So there are many ways of doing it. That's called proportional representation. But by no means is there any one right way, but this is something where we need to get some good people to put their heads together and listen to them, because that's not what's been done yet.
Yeah, I was just going to speak towards the proportional representation solution. We're in Santa Clara County right now, so let's use that as an example. If you look at how people vote for state legislature, Democrats get about 2/3 of the vote in the state elections, and Republican candidates get about 1/3 of the vote. Yet all 7 assembly members that represent all or part of, whose districts are either contained in or cover part of Santa Clara County, all 7 of them are Democrats. So the Republicans have no representation, Republicans in Santa Clara County have no representation in the state legislature. If we used a proportional system to elect our state legislature, then the representatives from Santa Clara County, well, maybe 5 of them would be Democrats and 2 would be Republicans. And of those 5 Democrats, some would be more liberal than others, and others would be more moderate. Of the 2 Republicans, one would probably be more conservative, and the other one would be more moderate. So you would get more points of view reflected in the legislature, which is what the proponents of Prop 14 said that they wanted. They wanted to get more moderates into the legislature. Well, the solution that they proposed doesn't do that. There are real solutions that will do that, and they do need to be explored.
Following up on the follow the money question, and out of curiosity because of some of the examples that were used, my understanding is that virtually every minor party opposed this proposition. Most of the major public interest groups in California took a position, a lot of them saying that they opposed Proposition 14, and that the 2 major parties opposed it. So with the 2 major parties opposing it, why weren't more resources put into defeating it, with both major parties, given the examples you used about how easy it will be to manipulate who gets into the top 2 and the potential for stealth candidates?
Yeah, I can only speculate, but let me give you what my speculation is. The polling showed Prop 14 passing handily, the pre-election polling. I guess, let me repeat the question. The question was, why didn't with all the minor parties and the 2 major parties and many public interest groups opposing Prop 14, why wasn't there more money put into the campaign against it? Especially from the 2 major parties, which do have deep pockets, and their allies who have deep pockets. And my speculation is that they looked at the polling, they saw it passing handily. Both major parties knew that they were going to have major battles in November for both the top of the ticket races, governor and U.S. senator. And they wanted to conserve their resources for battles where they could win, as opposed to throwing money at a battle that they didn't think they could win. Now, that's my speculation. It may not be the truth, the reality, but that's what I think is the reason why they did not devote the resources that would have been necessary to defeat Prop 14.
And, following the money again, who's funding this lawsuit effort?
I'm glad you're asking that question. What we
Who's
could,
funding- repeat the question?
yeah, the question is there anyone who is funding this lawsuit? And the answer is that, we're not taking any money from any political party. We're not taking money from any special interest group. This is purely a case where some concerned people have come together to challenge an unfair, undemocratic, and unconstitutional law. And no one put us up to this. We just strongly believe that this law must go.
You're challenging the constitutionality of SB 6. What do you hope to achieve with this particular lawsuit? Like, let's say you win, you're successful in this lawsuit. What's next? What happens?
Oh, so if a court declares SB 6 unconstitutional and kicks it out, what happens is that Prop 14 gets put on hold. To have life, Prop 14 needs to have a law that carries it out. So without a law to carry it out, it's basically either a dead letter or at least a dormant law that would wait for another law to put it back into effect. And this actually gives the legislature a rare opportunity to start over and think about a way to either implement Prop 14, or to even look even bigger picture and go, okay, what's the best approach to solving the complex array of problems that our state faces? Perhaps maybe we should, call a constitutional convention or show some deliberation before we literally shoot from the hip. All right, well, I guess we're done now. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'd be happy to respond individually to questions.
Good luck.